I think a lot of Vatican II remains unrealized. That's why people say, let's have Vatican III. Forget it. Vatican II, we barely realized it. And one of those unrealized features is the call of every single baptized person to be priest, prophet, and king. Well, prophet means evangelizer. When you go forth from Mass, you're not meant just to go home and, have breakfast and watch the football game. You're now called for the rest of the week to bring Christ to the world, to evangelize.
Welcome back to the Word on Fire show. I'm Brandon Vogt, the host and the senior publishing director. 5 years ago, we started what has since become the largest online community of Catholic evangelists in the world, the Word on Fire Institute. But where did this come from? What's the purpose of the Institute? And intriguingly, where is it going next? That's what we'll be talking with Bishop Robert Barron, the founder of the Word on Fire Institute, who joins us from his Diocese of Winona-Rochester. Bishop, good to see you.
Hey, Brandon. How you doing down there in sunny Orlando? I bet it's sunny and nice.
Doing well. Always sunny and nice.
Good.
You have been traveling a lot, per usual.
Yeah.
You've given talks, you've been to events, but I want to update people on a couple of recent trips you took. One was for your USCCB meeting. So let me start with that. How did that go? What was that like?
It's good. It's the meeting of the administrative committee. So I'm a chair of a committee, namely on youth, marriage, family life. And all the chairs of the committee are ex officio members of the administrative committee. So what we do is we meet in September to determine what's going to be on the agenda for November. I know it sounds a little bit dull because it is. It's more of a bureaucratic meeting, but it's a good chance to get together with some of the key people in the Bishops' Conference. So I always kind of enjoy it. And I spent a little time with Archbishop Broglio, who's the president of our conference, and he and I will be going over to the Synod together. So there was a meeting of some of the Synod delegates too while I was there.
I know I said you've been traveling a lot, and I think a lot of online readers and followers of Word on Fire see all of your many talks and events and think, wow, he must be on the road all the time. But in reality, you spend the majority of your time in the Diocese of Winona-Rochester. Tell us what's going on in the diocese. What's some exciting stuff happening there?
Well, a very exciting thing is our pastoral center. So we're moving the pastoral headquarters from Winona to Rochester, and that's been planned for a long time before I even got here. But I ratified that decision, and through the generosity of a wonderful donor, we had the land and the funds for this new building. And I got into it last Friday. We had a meeting over there, and I was able to get up to the second floor of the building. So the shell of it is all in place, and you can really sense what it'll be like. There's a beautiful chapel right in the middle of it, with a rose window looking out onto the kind of busy street behind it. So it'll be a wonderful evangelical tool, and it'll be the headquarters for the diocese. So very excited about that. Also coming up is our Lake Okoboji days. So Lake Okoboji is a resort in northern Iowa, and it's got this beautiful lake, a bit like Lake Geneva in Wisconsin. And a lot of Midwesterners go there for little, getaways. So the priests of this diocese have been meeting there for many, many years in late September for 3 days of prayer and discussion and so on. I'm actually giving the talks this year. Last year I went there, I had just arrived in the diocese. I barely knew anybody, but I came just to be with the priests. This year I'm saying the masses and giving the talks and all that. And then I'm going to leave Lake Okoboji on Tuesday night, spend 1 day back at my house, and then leave for Rome for Rome-Oboji. I'm going to be there for the Synod, for 5 weeks. So it continues to be a busy time.
Today, I want to talk about the Word on Fire Institute. 5 years ago, on October 1st, 2018, which is the feast of St. Thérèse of Lisieux, we'll come back to that in a moment, we launched the Word on Fire Institute. And since then, we've welcomed over 23,000 students who are all growing in their faith and being formed as evangelists. Lots of exciting developments in recent weeks, really. We hired a new senior director of the Word on Fire Institute, Dr. Matthew Petrusek. We'll come back to him in a moment. If you haven't been inside the Institute in a while, maybe you've been on the fence about joining, now's a really great time. We just unveiled a totally new platform that's more community-based. So you get to interact with the professors in real time and other students. We have a really slick new mobile app that makes it easier to go through the courses. you get access to over 40 video courses taught by some really top-notch theologians, philosophers, and evangelists. Many of the courses are taught by Bishop Barron. There's courses on Dante and the Church Fathers and many more. When you sign up, you also get a free subscription to our beautiful Evangelization and Culture journal. This comes out 4 times a year. You get a free copy of our Centered book. You get 100% access to all of Word on Fire's films and study programs, the Catholicism series, Pivotal Players, and much more. There's a book club group, a writing group, a practical evangelization group, so much. So learn more and check it out and sign up at the website wordonfire.org/institute. Let's go back to the beginning, Bishop. Take us back 5 years, 6 years ago. Where did the idea for the Word on Fire Institute come from? What prompted it? Why did you think it was needed?
The answer really to all those, Father Steve Grunow. So Father Steve, who's the CEO of Word on Fire, my former student who's been, working with me for years at Word on Fire. I remember vividly, I was on the back porch of my house in Santa Barbara, and Father Steve came out and said, we should have is like an institute that's associated with Word on Fire, and that has fellows and has courses and trains people to be evangelists in their everyday life. And I remember sitting in my chair and I looked at him and said, well, that sounds like a lot. I don't know how we're ever going to pull that off. But as usual, he was the great visionary. Every institutional advancement we've had really at Word on Fire was his idea. And this is no exception. So I would give him, the lion's share of the credit for proposing it and thinking it through. The idea, as I say, from the beginning was to form lay people as evangelizers. As anyone that's listened to me for a while knows, I think a lot of Vatican II remains unrealized. That's why people say, let's have Vatican III. Forget it. Vatican II, we barely realized it. And one of those unrealized features is the call of every single baptized person to be priest, prophet, and king. Well, prophet means evangelizer. When you go forth from Mass, you're not meant just to go home and, have breakfast and watch the football game. You're now called for the rest of the week to bring Christ to the world, to evangelize. Well, what people say, and I understand it, well, that's great, Bishop, but how do I do that? I don't have any equipment to evangelize. Well, all right, that's where the Word on Fire Institute comes in. It's meant to equip lay people for their work as evangelizers. So part of that's philosophy, part of it's theology, part of it's apologetics, part of it is understanding the culture, part of it is practical tips for evangelizing, and that's what the Institute is. It's designed to create a community of mostly lay people. There are some priests in the Institute, but mostly lay people who are now being equipped to do what Vatican II is calling them to do, namely evangelize.
I think I've heard you in the past use a military analogy that you want to build an army of evangelists, and that this is sort of the training ground. This is where you're sent off to school, to boot camp, to learn all the skills that you need to be an evangelist.
What's interesting, Brandon, is it's occurred to me, in a way, we're doing it the reverse of many of the great orders. So typically, go back to the Franciscans, the Dominicans and Benedictines, is they often began with what they call a first order, which is a community of men, right, consecrated men. Then a second order, which would be consecrated women around the charism of the founder. And then typically a third order. Think of a third order Franciscan, a third order Dominican. These would be lay people who are living and working in the world, but they are tied to the charism of the founder of that order, and they want to do some of that work in their own proper sphere. Okay, so usually it goes from 1 to 2 to 3. In a way, we started with 3. We started with the lay component. And I think that too is very Vatican II in its inspiration. We started with the laity, and we built up this, pretty impressive army. What's the number? 23,000 people. Now, my dream is we're going to move in the other direction too, that I would like there to be a clerical order of Word on Fire priests. And heck, I would love Word on Fire women religious as well. So let's get a second and first order, but we've started in a way with the third order, with the lay community.
So we launched the Word on Fire Institute on October 1st, 2018, which is the feast of St. Thérèse of Lisieux. Why her? What's her importance to the Institute? Well,
she's been important to me personally and to Word on Fire from the beginning. And she's the, patroness of the missions. And the church, I think, loves the kind of delicious poetry of that. Here's this young woman, died at 24. She was a cloistered religious in this little tiny convent in northwestern France. She never ventured, she went on one trip to Rome, but otherwise never ventured a few miles from her home. She was known at her death by her family and a handful of the sisters, So ironically, though, this woman cultivated within her heart during those years this profound desire to be a missionary and to exemplify really all of the great works of the church. But she saw herself as praying for the mission and dedicated to love, being a sort of missionary in the heart of the church. So Thérèse has been embraced by the church as a patroness of the missions. And so we see our work as very much missionary work. Indeed, through the social media going all over the world, that's true. But targeting especially, I would say, the disaffiliated, those who are kind of lost in the sea of secularism.
The Institute was led for many years by its initial senior director, Jared Zimmerer, who did a noble job leading the Institute. But we recently welcomed a new senior director, Dr. Matthew Petrusek. Tell us about Matthew and why you're excited to have him at the helm.
Yeah, Matthew's terrific. I first met him out in L.A. He was a friend of Dr. Chris Kazor, who's also involved with our Institute. Chris was teaching out at LMU, Loyola Marymount in L.A., and we would get together for dinner occasionally when I would come into Los Angeles. And then one day he said, hey, do you mind if I bring this a friend of mine, Matthew Petrusek? I think you'd really like him. I said, no, sure, bring him along. So I met him over dinner one night in L.A., discovered that he has a doctorate from the University of Chicago, so trained at the very highest level academically, and then found him to be also a very charming person and someone very dedicated to the church and its mission, who understood Word on Fire from the inside. Well, then whenever I'd come down to L.A. to have dinner with Chris Kazor, typically Matthew would join us. The other one, too, by the way, during those years who would join us was Edward Feser, someone we both know, one of the great Thomist philosophers operating today. So I call them the Kazor-Feser dinners. But Matthew would often join us for the Kazor-Feser dinners. So I came to know him in those years. And then, when the Institute was moving here to Rochester, Matthew moved with his family to join us. And I was, just very grateful to him for that. And then we saw the work he was doing, which was outstanding, both in terms of his writing, but also his organizational skill, which is at a very high level. So we saw all of that and thought, this is the man that can lead the Institute going forward.
You founded the Word on Fire Institute primarily to form evangelists in the Word on Fire mode of evangelization. So paint the picture for us. In your view, what does a fully formed evangelist look like?
Well, I would say, Brandon, a fully formed evangelist looks like a Christian. That someone who's been Christified through baptism, has been conformed to Christ, priest, prophet, and king, is by nature and vocation a prophet, someone that announces the gospel. Also someone who lives it by his or her life, that you can see Christ shining through that person by the way they live. So in a way, there's nothing all that distinctive and unusual about being an evangelist. It's the ordinary task of every baptized person. So I would say he or she looks like someone who has been baptized and realizes the full implication of that baptism and allows Christ to live in him, to live in her, and to speak through him or her. That's what a Word on Fire evangelist looks like. Now, to give it a little bit of the Word on Fire accent, I would say with a particular focus on the disaffiliated, on those who have left the church and gone into secularism, maybe a particular focus on the use of the new media to do this work. That's something we've done, from the very beginning. And I'd say too, with a kind of joyful confidence, we don't have so much of a belligerent approach, like kind of taking on the culture. Sometimes, I'll do that sometimes. But I'd say typically it's more of a positive, semina verbi approach, right? The seeds of the word. Where do you find the seeds of the word in the culture? So that might give it a particular Word on Fire accent. But I think to be an evangelist means to be a fully fledged baptized Christian.
I mentioned that we just released this brand new platform for the Word on Fire Institute, totally revamped. It's got community features, seminars, a whole lot more, but it's still primarily based around carefully crafted sequences of courses that are taught by our professors through the Institute. These courses guide students down a particular path of formation. I thought we could talk about a couple of them here.
Good.
One of them that I think is unique to Word on Fire is we have a whole sequence on popular culture. We, of course, have courses on theology, philosophy, apologetics, but also a sequence that walks through topics such as literature, comedy, writing, the science of happiness. Why is it important for evangelists to be familiar with the popular culture beyond the church and to learn to engage it?
That's where people live, right? They live in the context of that culture, both high and low. And I think Word on Fire I've tried to do that from the beginning, is to address the high culture, through the books and ideas and university and all that, but also the popular culture, because that's where people are. That's where they live. That's why from the beginning I was doing commentary on movies and music and so on. So I just think you've got to be rangy as an evangelist. You got to have a lot of tricks in your bag. You have to be able to, like a good tennis player, who can respond to the ball as it comes. Forehand, backhand, I got to race to the net, I got to go back, and that each shot is a little bit different. And there's never just one way to do it. And if people are living in the world of popular culture, well, then we ought to move in that world too and understand it. What's good about it? What's bad about it? What are the seeds of the word available there? It's tricky work, Brandon, but that's always been true. Think of Thomas Aquinas engaging Aristotle. That's the high culture of his time. Well, a lot of people were very critical of him for doing that. Newman engaging the British philosophical culture of his time. A lot of people thought that was an enormous mistake. So in a similar way, today, there are cultural movements both high and low. And some people say, well, look, you're going to get tainted if you deal with that culture. You can't watch a movie like that. You can't read those books. Well, I don't think evangelists can afford to be that fussy and puritanical. Jesus went into the taverns and restaurants of his time, and mixed and mingled with ordinary people in their everyday lives. He wasn't a guru on a mountainside, but went into the world where people were. Well, that's the model, I think, for Christian evangelism.
We have lots of other cool sequences of courses inside of the Institute. There's one on prayer and spiritual formation for evangelists. There's another on faith and science topics to get you up to speed on those. The last one I wanted to talk with you about is, although it's not an official course sequence, we have several courses inside the Institute on how to evangelize the nuns, those with no religious affiliation. For example, Dr. Stephen Bullivant teaches a course on understanding the nuns and how to reach them.
Yeah,
we have other courses on how to reach the indifferent, how to evangelize the open-minded. Why is it important for Catholics to understand this specific demographic, the nuns?
Because they're the growing demographic. There's the most aggressively expanding religious group in the Western world would be nuns. And for us to ignore that would be fatal to our mission. There's all the different levels. There's ecumenical outreach, the Protestant Catholic dialogue. There's the attempt to reach Catholics who have just become kind of lapsed in their faith. But I think this ever-growing army of young people who are disaffiliating from religion as such, that's the need of our time. That's the needful thing right now, is to engage those folks. And they are, I use the cliche term, but they're hungry for spiritual things. I think there's a load of evidence that suggests they're very interested in spiritual things, even as they're uneasy with classical and organized religion. So that's the call of our time. And, compare it to earlier periods. What was Ignatius responding to? What was Dominic responding to? What was Francis responding to? This is the needful thing in our time, it seems to me. So that's where the church needs to be.
Well, finally, I mentioned we've got several exciting things going on right now at the Institute, this new platform, new leadership, new courses, groups, and seminars. But help chart us your vision for the next 5, 10, 15 years of the Institute. Where do you see it going now in the future?
I gave some of it away earlier, I guess, when I said I want to go from the third order to the second order to the first order. I'd like to see this move in the direction of a religious order. Not that I want to turn the laity into clerics. What I mean is that the third order might be where we start, but then I want to see it expand to include men and women religious who are hyper-dedicated with their whole life, taking the classical vows and all that to do this work of evangelizing. Secondly, Brandon, I'm going to be a little bold here, but I think I see it as becoming a university in time. Things today start online. That's kind of a mark of our time. And we have affiliations with universities, but I can see this expanding to become one day a university. Look at the church has been giving rise to universities for centuries. That's just been a thing the church does. And they arose often out of a perceived need of that culture. This is the need of our culture. And so I envision seminaries, order, university, if I'm going to go, all the way.
Well, if I can tease out the university future a little bit, I'd like to announce here, I think for the first time, that Word on Fire is now partnering with the University of St. Thomas in Houston to offer a new master's degree program in evangelization and culture. So you can get a master's degree now in evangelization and culture. The purpose is to help students become professionally formed in the Word on Fire ethos. It's ideal for those who work in ministry or Catholic education, those who maybe want to pursue a PhD, or just ordinary Catholics who are seeking deeper intellectual and spiritual formation. Interestingly, the degree will include an optional course on using new media to evangelize, which will include hands-on training in the media lab at the University of St. Thomas. The degree is fully accredited and it can be done 100% online. However, students will have the option to spend an optional summer at the University of St. Thomas learning in person. The professors will be a mix of professors from the University of St. Thomas, from the Word on Fire Institute. But this is happening within a matter of months. They are launching the first in-person summer session this coming summer 2024, and then the online courses will start in the fall of 2024. So get excited about that. I think if you're a member of the Word on Fire Institute, you'll be among the first to learn about and sign up for this new master's program, which I think will fill up very quickly because they're only taking a small number of students. So that's another reason to get on board, get inside, be a part of this great community of evangelists. Well, it's time now for our question from one of our listeners. Today we have one from Meg in Scranton, Pennsylvania. She submitted her question at the website askbishopbarron.com, which you can as well. But Meg is asking about what happens at the end of time regarding humans. Here's her question.
Hi, Bishop Barron. This is Meg from Scranton, Pennsylvania. And my question is, at the end of time, will God still create humans in heaven? Thank you for all you do. God bless.
Yeah, the classical answer would be no to that question. And look at it this way. God seems to like this process of development and unfolding. So heaven is a kind of terminus of a process that begins here. So we're born, in this, on this earth and in this environment. And we come of age morally and spiritually. We're compelled to make decisions that form our character. And so in this whole process, we're kind of evolving. We're developing toward the person God wants us fully to be. And that comes to its fulfillment after we die. And we leave behind, this body of death or this limited expression of our physicality, and then come to a renewed, elevated physicality, what Paul calls a spiritual body in heaven. My point is that there's been this sort of long process. So it would make sense in a way for in heaven for God to be now restarting that process. Heaven is the culmination of a process that begins with our birth here and our coming of age in this environment. So that's probably the way Aquinas would get at that.
Well, thanks for that question, Meg, and thanks to all of you for watching and listening. One more time, I want to encourage you to join the Word on Fire Institute. You can do so at the website wordonfire.org/institute. We have a free 30-day trial, so you can sign up for free and watch the videos, participate in the community, receive these amazing resources like the Evangelization and Culture Journal and the free copy of the Centered book. Start watching any of Bishop Barron's films. So check it out, see what all the hype is about and why 23,000 Catholics are already a part of this thriving community. Again, the website's wordonfire.org/institute. Well, thanks again for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on the Word on Fire show.
Thank you.